All right, again, if you're just joining us here, the developing story is that the Lakers and Spurs have reopened trade talks centered on Kawhi Leonard. Now, the Lakers are trying to get Kawhi, but Harris, they're not the only team that could find a way to land Kawhi. There are other teams that have made calls, picked up the phone, and have shown interest in landing Kawhi. Of course, much like Paul George in the past, there are fears from other teams that he's not going to re-sign a long-term deal with them.
Yeah, and that's kind of always been the thought process behind it, which brings my kind of thought process with Kawhi to, like, it's so difficult to make like actual trades for Kawhi, because if you're a team like the Celtics or maybe even the Clippers or something, how much can you physically pay for a guy that you don't know is going to actually stay with your team? But when I came up with these trades were made up, just to add some context with them. These trades all work from a cap perspective. Again, you can have negative cap space and still make a trade. All these teams can make it work. B, this can work from an extension standpoint. So I'm making these trades with the thought process that Kawhi would sign an extension with the team that he gets traded to, and also, again, that the Spurs are getting fairly compensated for in these trades.
All right, so outside of the Lakers, we're going to take a look at 4 teams that could also make a trade for Kawhi Leonard, that could find a way to bring in that superstar, join their roster. Harris, we'll start things off with the Boston Celtics, a team that maybe across the NBA has the most assets to make a deal work.
They do have the most assets to make a deal work. And I want to make this very clear. My opinion about this, about Kawhi going to the Celtics, has always been this. If you're the Celtics, do you really want to trade for Kawhi Leonard with the roster that you have? The team is so stacked. The bench is so good. I mean, the roster at this point before a Kawhi trade is about 10 deep.
But it's Kawhi.
But it is Kawhi. So if you're the Celtics and you can legitimately make a move for Kawhi Leonard, I think you go ahead and do it. So this is the trade I got for you.
All right, so we'll break down this trade again. Boston has plenty of assets to make it work. They've got some key core players. Here's your trade offer then, Harris, on the Rubenstein trade machine. Jaylen Brown, Scary Terry, Marcus Morris, and 2 first-round picks, one from the Kings and then one from the Memphis Grizzlies as well, because the Celtics have all of the first-round picks next season.
All of the first-round picks. They have 5 first-round picks going into next season. 4 potential first-round picks going next year, because if the Sacramento Kings pick ends up being number 1 overall, it goes to the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Celtics would end up getting the Sixers first-round pick. So they have 4 potential firsts, and from this one, the Spurs end up getting 2 great young players in Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier, as we saw in the playoffs last year, a really good expiring contract in Marcus Morris, and 2 high first-round draft picks. If you're looking at this and you're saying to yourself, wow, Harris, this is way less than what the Lakers are giving up, it's because the Celtics are in the Eastern Conference. And that is going to drive down the price for a Kawhi Leonard trade. Now, if you're the Celtics, I want to make one more thing very clear. Stop telling me that this lineup doesn't make sense. You can totally play Kawhi Leonard, Gordon Hayward, and Jason Tatum on the floor at the same time. Absolutely, 100%. You can totally do that on this kind of team. I am sick and tired of hearing people think that you can't have 3 small forwards on the court at the same time. Of course you can.
Isn't that the Lakers' dream plan?
Of course you can. The spacing in the modern-day NBA and positionless basketball allows you to move players all over the court. Jason Tatum can play the 3, the 4, or sometimes can play the 2. Kawhi can play multiple positions, as can Gordon Hayward. And if you're the Spurs, Jaylen Brown can play the 2 or the 3. You can move around Murray and the rest of the guards. You get Terry Rozier and Lonnie Walker coming off the bench. So it's a better move for the Celtics. I think the Spurs are kind of looking at this like, we're a little bit stacked at guard now with getting Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier and Lonnie Walker. But I want to make this very clear. The Celtics are not trading Jason Tatum. It's not happening. It's not happening.
You just mentioned a little bit the concern for me when you looked at those teams and the way that the rosters are built. The Spurs have all of the guards, and the Celtics are a little bit thin at guard. And that, I think, could be a potential issue really for either team. But folks watching on Facebook and on YouTube, let us know who says no. Celtics or Spurs? If one of them say no, Harris, obviously you think both teams say yes. Who says no?
I personally think the Spurs say no and ask for maybe a different player than either Terry Rozier or Marcus Morris. But the difficult thing is that with the Celtics and the Spurs trying to make a trade here, cap issues is a big thing for the Celtics. They are very much over the cap with that Gordon Hayward contract and Kyrie and Horford. They have to pay Kyrie next year. So the cap is the biggest issue for the Celtics. which is another reason why I don't actually think the Celtics would make a move for Kawhi. I think they like their team too much right now. I think they want to give these guys a run. And from a cap perspective, I mean, they're not in hell by any means. I mean, they're in a great cap spot, but why acquire Kawhi Leonard and have to pay him that crazy extension when you have to give Kyrie all that money? You're waiting on Jaylen Brown in 2 years, Jason Tatum in 3, Horford needs a new deal in 2 years. You got a lot of money going on with the Celtics right now. I think from an asset standpoint, this is a great move in a vacuum for the Spurs, but I think that they would want to move some pieces around to get more forwards because there are a lot of guards in this right now.
I see more of a split vote here. Some say the Spurs say no, some say the Celtics say no. That's why I always think that maybe it's a good trade.
And that's kind of where it is. Like, I think that this would be a great starting point for the Celtics and the Spurs to talk about, because the Spurs are absolutely going to want one of Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. There's a 0.000% chance that Jason Tatum is getting traded this offseason. Zero. Not happening. I'll say it a million more times than I have to. Jason Tatum is not getting traded this offseason for anyone. They can't even make a move for Anthony Davis because of the crazy Rose rule, which we all figured out yesterday, which means that you can't trade for 2 players who were signed using the Rose rule, and apparently Kyrie was used for that.
I have a quick trade proposal here I want to get your quick thoughts on. Kenton Kumar in the YouTube comment says, odds on Kawhi to OKC. He says Roberson, Patterson, and one more player.
That's very cute.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
That's not enough for Kawhi.
Sadly.
On to your next trade. This one involves the Philadelphia 76ers getting Kawhi Leonard for Markelle Fultz, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Jared Bayless, and a future first-round pick. They also get Patty Mills in this deal.
So again, less than what the Lakers would have to give up because this is in the Eastern Conference. But if you're the 76ers and you're the Spurs, you're getting – I like this a lot for both sides, especially with what the Spurs are getting back for Kawhi Leonard. They're getting Markelle Fultz, who, look, if there's a team that's going to be able to turn around Markelle Fultz's career, the San Antonio Spurs are a good start. Robert Covington is a Spur. I mean, he's the perfect Spurs player.
He's a good fit.
Dario Saric is a fantastic player for the Spurs to build around down low. And that Jared Bayless expiring contract, I think the Spurs would try to move that, but the Sixers have to get that off the books. So that's why they attach that 2021 first-round pick, which is unprotected, which is why it's such a valuable pick for the Spurs in this trade.
So here's your lineup then with the 76ers, and you have Zaire Smith starting at the 3, the small forward spot. It's maybe a little bit undersized, but it's a fun lineup.
It is, and I think that there's also a possibility that we see the 76ers throw Zaire Smith or one of the guys that they just drafted as well into that trade. I don't think that's out of the question at all, just to kind of fit a couple more assets in there with cap as well.
Hey, do you know who's the perfect player for this lineup?
Who?
Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, really. Mikal Bridges is the perfect player on this team. Oh, it's almost like that was a bad trade.
So Harris.
I think that 76ers trade, there are a couple more pieces that you could add from a Sixers perspective. But remember, you got to keep this reasonable for what the Spurs are asking from an Eastern Conference team. This is them trading Kawhi to a team that they are not going to have to face unless it's the finals very consistently. So the price tag on Kawhi is going to be lower. Not to mention, the Spurs also get to dump or would end up dumping Patty Mills' contract in some form of this trade. So I can see a couple of comments coming in saying, oh, maybe the Spurs hang up the phone and the 76ers aren't giving up enough. Again, I think they could give up maybe one more young player like a Zaire Smith or a Landry Shamet.
A lot of it depends on how much they value Markelle Fultz
Exactly.
and what his actual value is.
That's a very good point. Markelle Fultz's trade value is so important to this, and
so unknown.
I would say this. I think that this 76ers Kawhi trade happens in August once we figure out what's going on with Markelle Fultz and whether or not that he's actually progressed a good amount this summer. This isn't happening in the next 2 days. This trade would happen later down the line if the 76ers don't end up with Paul George or LeBron James.
I think if Kawhi gets traded, the most likely options are the LA Lakers, the Celtics, and the Sixers after that. But Harris, you do have 2 other teams that make sense, and we'll stick in LA, but we'll go to the Clippers this time. Here's your trade proposal there. Tobias Harris, Patrick Beverley, Jerome Robinson, and a future first.
Now, looking at this now, and we're going to get some people for it, this is a lighter trade because I think, and
My first thought as well.
This is going to be really, people are going to hate me for saying this. The Spurs would allow a lesser trade to the Clippers than they would to the Lakers. 100%. A, to spite the Lakers. B, to spite Kawhi. And C, also because It's not a big threat. I mean, are you really?
It's
if
the
you're the
Clippers.
Spurs and you're getting that package back of Tobias Harris, Patrick Beverley, Jerome Robinson in a first-round pick, you're not afraid of sending Kawhi Leonard to the Clippers because you already know that the Clippers, they're not really. I'm sorry, Clippers fans. They're not a big-time threat in terms of the NBA as a whole.
You and I were debating earlier before we went live about who was on the core for the Clippers, and I was kind of in the mindset, I don't know if they really have core players right now. Like I like Lou Williams, I like Shai Gilgeous, but are those locked-in core guys?
I think, again, I want to make this clear. I think this Clippers trade is a little light. I think you could see a couple more first-round picks added in. They're not going to add in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Clippers aren't going to move him at this point. The Spurs aren't going to take him anyway. They already drafted Lonnie Walker. That's super repetitive and unnecessary. Maybe they add in another younger player. I mean, the problem with the Clippers is that they don't have a lot of young, cheap contracts to move. They have a lot of guys who are getting paid double-digit $1 million that are really difficult to move. I mean, you can look at their cap as well, talking about the Los Angeles Clippers. Like, they can't move Boban because, you can't really move Boban at this point. He's getting paid
but he's the GOAT,
$15 million. Boban is the GOAT. You can't move Gallinari. He's getting paid $21.5 million for one of the worst contracts in basketball. The Spurs don't give a crap about Sam Decker. They're not going to move Milos Teodosic. He's 31 years old. He's getting paid, what is he getting paid? He's getting paid $6.3 million next year. So Beverly is a good cheap contract. He's 29 years old. I mean, maybe you try to move like a CJ Williams. Like, that's the problem with the Clippers, that they don't have a lot of young players to move outside of, a Jerome Robinson who will be on the bench, or a Patrick Beverley as well.
I saw a comment about Tobias unlocking that potential with Pop, which I actually do kind of agree with that.
I'm not high on Tobias Harris, but look, I'm a fan of everyone in the NBA. I want Tobias Harris I want everyone to succeed in the NBA.
Unrelated note, I see a comment that says Heat are going to sign LeBron and trade for Kawhi. I think we found Jordan Giorgio's burner account.
Jordan Giorgio's burner YouTube account, still asking me on a weekly basis what LeBron's chances are going back to the Heat. I apologize to every Miami Heat fan out there, including Jordan Giorgio.
Zero.
Zero.
Or is that 3? You're not being very clear with that, Harris.
Zero.
There you go.
It's not happening.
All right, there. So Clippers were the 3rd team. How about the Cleveland Cavaliers? And we know the Cavs have at least made overtures and tried.
This is the trade that I'm going to get killed the most for.
Emphasis on
I
try.
already know. I already know I'm going to get killed the most for this Cavs trade. People are going to come at me that it's too light and this and that it doesn't work. And from a lot of perspectives, I can understand it. But again, if you're the Spurs, this is called keep LeBron out of the West. That's what this trade is. If you trade Kawhi to the Cavs, LeBron's going back to the Cavs. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're making sure that LeBron's not going to Lakers, and you're making sure that Kawhi and LeBron are staying in the Eastern Conference. So I have the Spurs getting back George Hill.
Pop's favorite.
Mind you, that George Hill trade value is way higher to the Spurs than any other team, regardless of his contract. They get Colin Sexton, which a little bit repetitive with Lonnie Walker, but I think the two can play on the court at the same time. You can put you can put Colin Sexton at the 1, Lonnie at the 2. Keep Murray as a longer 2, kind of a stretch 3 kind of player. Cedi Osman comes in to be, a nice international player off the bench for Pop, and a 2020 first unprotected pick. I think this trade needs a star on it somewhere. I think that this trade is, if the Spurs get this trade offered to them, they say no and say come back to us with a better star on the wing.
The flip side is, what else can the Cavs even offer?
That's my issue with this. I mean, they're not going to put Larry Nance in the deal. It's just, what's the point of the Cavs doing that?
Jeff Green.
Kevin Love is not being put in that trade. The Spurs don't want him. The Spurs do not want Kevin Love. So if you're the Cavs, maybe you try to facilitate a 3-team deal between, maybe the Jazz get thrown in there. Maybe you try to move Kevin Love to the Jazz so he can take over at the 4. There's a Joe Ingles thing going on in there somewhere. Like, there are a lot of different options that you could do with the Cavs and the Spurs. I think that is light. I think what we had there between between George Hill, Sexton, Osman, and the pick, it's a little light.
It is light.
But if you're the Spurs,
maybe you just really don't want Kawhi in the West.
You're keeping LeBron out of the West. You're keeping Kawhi out of the West. You're getting a young point guard in Colin Sexton and an unprotected first. It's a good place to start.
All right, folks, let us know, what team do you think Kawhi will play for this year? Give me a heart for the Lakers, a like for the 76ers, a wow face if you think he stays with the Spurs, or a lad face if he stays with the Spurs, excuse me, and a wow face if he stays with, or if he goes to the Celtics. If you think it's a different team, if you're a Heat fan or whatever, let us know in the comments section on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Harris, I think it's either the Spurs or the Lakers here. One of those two teams. I don't know who else it would end up being because I don't know if any team wants to make a long-term offer in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the biggest issue when you're talking about the Kawhi Leonard trade. Who is actually going to trade for him without an idea of whether or not he's going to sign an extension? I mean, the only reason that the Thunder were able to trade for Paul George last year is because they got such a good deal at the time. I mean, trading Victor Oladipo and Sabonis for Paul George without an extension is a great move. So I don't think you're going to see that kind of lopsided trade this year. I just, unless you get an extension, I can't see a trade.